distinction of, yes, soldiers are trained to fight, we're trained to end wars through fighting, but actually to end wars through negotiation, trying to bring a peace together, hugely satisfying. And of course, that's what's got to happen in Ukraine. Let's face it, whatever Vladimir Putin intended to do, whatever view he had of the capabilities of his Russian army, they've been proven to be not as effective as he thought. Their strategy of a lightning strike from Belarus down to Kyiv has not happened. And the Ukrainians have fought terribly effectively with great determination for the peace and freedom of their own country. So this, rather like Bosnia and other conflicts, has got to end around the negotiating table. And the sooner a third party, whether it's the Turks, the Israelis, the Chinese, and any of those are possible parties, can bring the Ukrainians and the Russians together around the negotiating table, the better, to try and find a negotiated way to end this, to stop the end of the killing, so much the better.
I mean, it is horrendous. Just looking at it, thinking that this doesn't feel like an actual thing that is happening, and it really is. You know, you see this sort of thing, you think, oh, well, it's somewhere else and it's not. But actually, this is happening now. Right now, people in Ukraine are being terrorised by this war, which doesn't really make any sense at all. Now, you have been in different war zones, so you'll know the experience of this sort of conflict. How does it end? You talked about peaceful talks, and you're saying, but what sort of peaceful talks do you think that they could, what kind of agreement do you think might work?
Well, that's the big issue. There's got to be compromise on both sides. The Ukrainians will have to compromise to a degree, and Vladimir Putin will have to compromise. I think President Zelensky of Ukraine is already signalling that Ukraine will give up its ambition to become a member of NATO, and that is probably right, given the historic linkage that most Russians have had with Ukraine. Most Russians think that Ukraine is part of Greater Russia. So for Ukraine not to join NATO, most Russians would think that is right. But then what are the Ukrainians also going to have to give up? There's the eastern republics, Donetsk and Luhansk, which actually in anybody's book are certainly Russian-speaking. They're very much orientated towards Russia, but is that something that the Ukrainians are prepared to do, prepared to give up those two republics to Russia? And then, of course, you look at the south of the country, where through Russian force of arms, eventually Crimea, which was annexed in 2014, they've now fought their way to probably creating a land bridge from Crimea through the Donbass into Russia. Is this going to be a status quo? Is this going to be part of the future? Will Crimea and the Donbass be part of Russia? These are aspirations of the Russians. Are the Ukrainians prepared to give those things up? So there's going to have to be a lot of give and take on both sides. And without give and take on both sides, the fighting is going to continue. Putin may have thought that a lightning strike from Belarus to Kyiv would have ended the war in a few days and he could have a regime change in Ukraine. That's not happening. Their war of maneuver has failed. They're now into a war of attrition, creating huge casualties amongst the Ukrainian population. How much longer can this go on? I hope and pray it doesn't go on for too much longer. So there's got to be give and take on both sides sooner, hopefully, rather than later.
Yeah, really, we're all praying for that. Now, I want to talk more about you, though, because you took on the top job. I mean, you were the head of the British Army. That's a big feat to be doing it's a massive job. That's a big responsibility. Talk to me about the moment of what it was like heading up the army for this country.
Well, it's a huge responsibility. It's a huge privilege. It's a huge honour. At the time I took over the job in 2006, it was a very difficult period. We were engaged in the operations in Iraq, and we were engaged increasingly in the operations in Afghanistan. And the way the army had been organised and resourced following the Tony Blair Defence Review of 97-98, just a few years before, was that we were resourced and organised to conduct one operation like that, not two. So we were under huge pressure. And I felt it was absolutely my responsibility to say to the Secretary of State for Defence, to say to the Prime Minister, look, we'll do whatever you want. You're the elected government of the day, but just give us the resources, give us the tools, and we will do the job. But you're asking us to do 2 major operations. We're only really resourced to do 1, so just give us a bit more. The frustration thing, from my point of view, is I just didn't seem to be able to get that message across. And so I'm afraid at a time when too many people were leaving the army because sergeants and corporals and captains, their families were saying, look, this is just going on for too long, too much pressure. They were leaving and our manpower was going down. I knew I had to do something about it. So if I couldn't get the authorities to agree, I decided to talk more publicly in the media and gain a bit more popular support for that. And whether that was the right thing to do or not, I think will still be something I'll contemplate to my dying day. But at least it said to those in the army, the families of those in the army, those who just cared about our army, actually, the new boss understands the issues and he knows we're under pressure and he's doing something about it. And that was hugely important for the morale of the armed forces at the time. Anyway, fast forward, we carried on. We completed the operations in Iraq. We eventually completed our combat operations in Afghanistan. Yes, I know last year Afghanistan ended in a most unfortunate fashion. That's another story. But I believe I did the best that I could in trying to lead the army in difficult times. Was I right? Well, maybe the history books will show. I've written a couple of books. People can read them and they can judge for themselves. But it was a great privilege and an honour to serve for 40 years in the British Army, to lead wonderful soldiers in the British Army. And it was my privilege and pleasure to do that.
Well, I mean, it's been an amazing career. I've read a lot about you. But now what are you doing then? Because you've left the army, you've retired. You said you've written a few books. What else is happening with you?
Well, when I first left the army, I was Constable of the Tower of London. So we lived in the Tower of London and I was responsible to the Queen for the running of the Tower of London. That was a largely honorary and ceremonial appointment. And of course, I also went into the House of Lords in 2011 and have enjoyed the privilege of being part of our legislature, commenting on government issues, keeping the government of the day up to the mark and participating in lawmaking. Perhaps in more recent years, what's been pretty challenging was that I now chair the National Emergencies Trust. The National Emergencies Trust was set up after the Manchester Arena bombing and the Grenfell Tower fire. Those events happened in 2017, when the public was hugely generous, but not all of their generosity went where it should have gone. There was a certain amount of fraud. And the Charity Commission challenged the major charities in that sector to say, you've got to come up with a better formula for the future. Cut a long story short, the National Emergencies Trust was formed. I was invited to be the independent chairman of that. And then come the pandemic, on the 18th of March 2020, we launched our coronavirus appeal, quite quickly raised just short of £100 million, which we distributed right around the country, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, through 15,000 grants to charities and community groups. And that was a huge challenge. Doesn't take very long to say it. It took a heck of a lot of doing. And that's a challenge which I and my team have thoroughly enjoyed rising to. So that's a kind of flavour of some of the things I'm doing at the present moment.
Oh, no rest for the wicked. This is not retirement. What are you doing? Well, listen, it's been...
I do play golf, not as well as I should. I enjoy fishing, not as often as I would like. But and my wife is Lord Lieutenant of Norfolk. She's the Queen's representative in Norfolk, where we live. So I enjoy supporting her. I run the family farm in Norfolk. We've got 4 children and 10 grandchildren and 3 dogs. So actually, I'm quite busy. But
you're busy still.
Frankly, moss doesn't grow on a falling stone. So I'm quite happy to be busy.